Thank you very much. My presentation will be jumping forward a little bit in history to a little bit closer to where we are now on the timescale, talking about shopping in Colonial Parramatta around 1803, 1804. This is an historical archaeology project that I've been working on with a real focus in this particular project of looking at a range of different digital humanities approaches, both to sort of analysing the data and to sharing the outcomes of the research with sort of a broader population, more with the general public. I'll work through some of that. Before I go on, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live, the Yuggera and Turrbal peoples, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. This is part of a larger project of work that I've been doing, which is being led by Katie de Gluyas from the University of Queensland. She received a Dr. A.M. Hertzberg Fellowship from the State Library of New South Wales to explore some of the data sets they had around Colonial Parramatta and the broad topic of her overall research is an archaeological view of industry in Colonial Parramatta. And the specific focus of the work has been around geolocating people and objects in Colonial Parramatta and establishing links and patterns of movement between them. One of the main things I've been working on in this project is a very comprehensive list of Parramatta residents, from the very early or first colonial settlement period through to about 1730. So we're currently running at about 6,000 people, but continuing to add more people and more records from a range of different sources as we go. So one of the key sources that is the focus of this project that I'm doing is Roland Hassel's Day Sales Book. So there's a number of original manuscript sales books from Hassel's general store that was located in Parramatta, opened in about 1803 and ran to about 1820. You can see here a nice example of one of the pages. So it's quite a rich data set, but also there's a fair bit of complexity in the data set in terms of trying to get some meaning out of it. So we have lots of information about dates, individual purchases, what they're purchasing, and then we've got monetary values, which can be a little bit mixed in terms of whether it's a price per item or a total price for the transaction. And there's also a lot of other financial transactions that get recorded in the books. From a transcription point of view, it was quite complex because of the tabular data. It wasn't just like a free-form transcription of a letter or other documents. So I actually prepared a tabular form for doing the transcription to help keep the data into different columns and allow better analysis. One of the particular challenges with this was the creative spelling that was used by a lot of the people who were keeping these records. It's obvious there's a number of different people contributing to the records, and lots of words have lots of variation in their spelling. So the State Library of New South Wales works with an online platform called From the Page, and that's a platform designed to allow volunteer collaboration on preparation of transcription. So that worked really well. They have a big pool of people who are sitting at home and preparing transcriptions all the time of a wide range of documents. So we still have a number that we've really only got full transcription done on the 1803-4 sales book, but there's a number of other records that we're currently working through, including some store ledgers, which cover a much longer period from 1811 to 22, and some other day sales books. So as we progress through this project, we'll have some ability to do some sort of analysis across time in terms of seeing how things are changing in what they're selling and who they're selling them to, and maybe the prices as well. So from the transcription, we're able to extract a text file, which then I used both Excel and OpenRefine to do the cleansing on the data. It needed a lot of cleansing to get it from from the sort of directly transcribed records into something that was a bit meaningful. We in Excel, the information was presented like this. We basically got it down to a line item per item purchased or per transaction. Open Refine, so that's open source software. I've used a lot of open source software as part of this. Makes it very accessible to everyone. It was really good at helping with the spelling inconsistencies because it's really great at identifying similarly spelt words, and you can individually go through and get them converted into a single consistent spelling. And Excel I found better for doing things like filling in missing areas. So you can see that in some places, you know, Kaylee may have had a mister in that column, but not in this column. So we've filled that through to try and get some consistency. This gives you a bit of an idea of some of the transactions that we were recording. I then did some work with a typology to sort of group the purchases into different categories. Based on our previous archaeological work done in Parramatta. There's been quite a lot of that. And so that will give us an ability in the future to perhaps do some more cross-referencing of things that have actually been found in situ in the archaeological deposits compared to what was being sold from the local store. So after doing some analysis, on the left you can see by category that very much the dominant category was clothing and sewing, lots of fabric and sewing accessories, some actual completed garments as well. And then after clothing and sewing, food was the next most popular purchasing item, but very much most of the food was sort of long storage type food, no fresh fruit and produce at all. There was also a smaller proportion of things like tableware, household items, some recreational items, particularly tobacco, some alcohol and a few other things as well. An interesting finding was the number of actual financial transactions that went through the shop book. So I think in the early days of the colony, there was a real shortage of ready cash, and people tended to use the local shop as almost like a bank, and they would be paying each other through their accounts at the shop. So that was quite interesting to see. So looking a bit more deeply at clothing and sewing, which was the most common transaction type, we were able to break that down into a number of subcategories like ready-made clothing, some dressmaking services, accessories, grooming, hairdressing, but the vast majority was related to sewing. This then gives you a bit of an overview of what the most popular items were. So once we've done a bit of grouping, we could see that ribbon was the most popular item, obviously a fairly low cost item that was within the reach of most people in Colonial Parramatta. Things like thread and button. Silk thread was very popular, noting that in that era, it was a very popular female activity to do fancy embroidery with silk thread, so that we could see that being regularly purchased by many of the women at the store. Printed cotton, which would have been a fairly serviceable standard fabric for day-to-day clothing needs for a wide range of women. And then we've got a number of more specialised types of cloth, such as broadcloth, which could be used for suiting, muslin, which was used in a lot of ladies' clothing, tape, some generic cloth, linen, and dungaree I thought was worth mentioning. That's very like common current day denim. So that would be very much for the hard wearing artwork clothes. So a wide range of different types of products there that were being sold from the store. Then in terms of trying to make this a little bit more interesting and understandable to a wider audience, I did a lot of work around trying to find images that corresponded to a lot of these products, because they're not necessarily things that people understand or relate to today. Finding these images, I took a bit of digging. I found that quite a number of the Australian museums, some of them have good online collections of photographs of their collections, which was helpful. But the Victorian Albert Museum in London was probably one of the key sources I went to. They have a really large textiles and clothing collection, and they've got a lot of that collection in digital format. So that was a really great source. So, you know, it allowed us to actually visualise this is what that fancy silk looked like when you purchased it to do your silk embroidery. Buttons came on cards like this, so you'd buy them in fairly large quantities. Broadcloth being used for making trousers, gilt buttons, and the one on the top right is actually a sample book for kerseymere, which was very, very common and popular everyday clothing type fabric. And these are the sorts of books they would have had at the store, providing examples of all the different types of fabric that were available. I then took that a little bit further and went and sourced a range of contemporary images from that period, both across Australian colonial populations. So a number of these people are colonial people from Australia. You can see that dress and fashion was clearly an important aspect of their lives. I was also able to once again source some of these images from some museum collections that were available online and from the Victorian Albert Museum for contemporary clothing images. We're also able to draw on a few, there's not a lot, but there's a few nice colonial drawings that are held by a number of the museums that give you a bit of an idea of what people actually looked like in that day. This one I found quite interesting with a range of different male clothing based on their role in society, what they were doing. I also went and did a little bit of an exploration around advertising at this time. So the Sydney Morning Herald was up and running, and we were able to gather just a selection of advertisements sort of from that 1800 to 1820 sort of period, and looking at advertisements for similar types of goods from general stores. And I was then able to sort of flesh out some of the history of some of the larger retailers who were starting off at this time. But there were lots of interesting things listed in these. These were all outsourced from Trove. And I used an online platform called Buoyant Tools to do some text analysis of those advertisements. I found that you can see that the quality of the advertisements, the text is a little bit dodgy at times. So I tried a few different tools to do sort of the scanning of the text. I found, in fact, the best option was just the embedded tool within Trove itself gave us the closest set of data, but it did need a little bit of manual tidying up to get the words appearing correctly. But that then gave me the ability to prepare a bit of a word cloud, which some people like, which was quite easy through Buoyant Tools. It's actually a really good tool if you're doing any detailed analysis of text. It can provide some really deep analysis if that's what you're interested in. We then did a little bit of mapping to geolocate both some of the customers as well as some of the key locations in Colonial Parramatta. This is a lovely 1804 map of Parramatta, which shows the street layout and a lot of the key allotments. So we're actually able to locate a number of our purchases around town, number one being the location of the store. To do this, I used QGIS, which once again is an open source mapping tool, and was able to sort of geolocate this base map and then locate a number of these individuals. I also undertook some analysis. I selected 4 individuals and had a look at their shopping records. So individuals from different walks of life. So this is a selection of the transactions for Captain Abbott and his wife, Mrs. Abbott. And it gives you a little bit of an understanding of the types of goods they're purchasing. We found for the Abbotts, for example, we found nearly all of the purchases were related to sewing and clothing. So Mrs. Abbott probably had a fairly big impact on that. But you can see that there's also sort of day-to-day essentials there as well, like soap and tea and pepper. So tea and sugar were very commonly purchased food items. I also fleshed out a little bit of the background around the Hassels to provide some context to the store and why he started the undertaking in the first place. But I'll jump through, and hopefully this will work for you, and you'll be able to actually see it. So I prepared a website. Can you still see that now that I've jumped across to the website?
We cannot. I think you shared your PowerPoint and not your screen.
I will just do a reshare of the, yes, I see. Reshare that screen. You can see shopping in Colonial Parramatta now. So this is the blog. So I developed that on WordPress, which once again is free. I think they let you have a site up and running for 12 months before you have to pay any money. They've got a lot of templates. You can pick a template that you like. And from there, I've sort of basically summarised the different areas. People can interact with those as a menu. We've got some background around Parramatta. We've got the background information about Roland Hassel and his wife, where they came from, what they were doing. We've got a bit of a summary here of the retail advertising and a little bit about the early retailers, so including people like Simeon Lord, and then a bit of an analysis around some of the goods that we were seeing in the retail advertising, which was a little bit different to what Hassel was selling in his store. Interestingly, Hassel didn't advertise anywhere any time, so he obviously was close enough to his community that he didn't need to advertise. But even things like dress dolls, which were very popular with the children at that time, if you had the money to afford to spend on them. This page sort of runs through the detail of the transcription and all the analysis we did around the sales. And I've built in these sort of galleries of all the different products, images of those, as well as some of the charts I showed you before. With clothing, the colonials, I've then looked at the clothing in terms of, convict class, working class, and middle and upper classes, to give people a bit of a feel for what we're talking about in terms of this clothing that was being sold. And then this page runs through the geolocation and picks out the details of a few of the people we looked at, such as the Abbotts, the Marsdens. People would have heard of Samuel Marsden and his wife, the Evanses. George Evans was a surveyor and actually did a number of these lovely watercolour images of the early settlement. And then I've also picked on a possibly less wealthy, very run-of-the-mill convict pair who only had 4 or 5 purchases that were fairly modest, I think, but that gives you sort of the full range of purchasing power. And I also did a little bit of a summary of the previous research. So the purpose of the project was really just to illustrate that you can make some of this information much more digestible and accessible to a much wider audience, but still be based on, good, solid historical research and analysis. So thank you for listening.